us about your activity in the music business and the experiences there that made you evaluate this area, this issue, and what led you to write the book?
Well, I've always played music, and I still do, and if that's, I'll probably be putting the coffin with a paintbrush in one hand and a guitar in the other, and that's just really what I'm about as a person. But when I was 19, I left Dublin. I played in bands there, and I went to live in New York, and I landed right on my feet, and I met some people and started playing music. And I had this friend, if he ever hears on the radio, his name is Eddie Luke, and I'd love to hear from him again. But we had a punk rock band, and we were contacted by an individual that wanted to meet us down in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And we went to this what I would call a speakeasy about 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was a very strange experience. It was a very creepy and a very disturbing place. And I really was out of my depth here, and so was he, even though he was like a native New Yorker. We were definitely in a different kind of world that we had never, that was like something out of a Batman movie or something. It was very, very odd and very strange. And so we met this woman there who was, I was apparently a big shot in the music business. She was an heiress to a wealthy family. And she looked us up and down with this cold sort of reptilian stare, evaluating us, and she immediately had stripped us down and knew exactly what she was dealing with, 2 innocent kids. And she basically told us that we had to change our style of music, provide sexual services for men along the way. And if we did that, we'd be successful. And she even told us the kind of music we were to actually play. Become a heavy metal band, and we left that thing, half freaked out by the experience and half laughing. And we had no idea that heavy metal was going to make a big return as a music, because it was already kind of dead at that point. And sure enough, a year later, all these bands from Motley Crue to Poison to Guns N' Roses to Cinderella to endless numbers of them, these heavy metal bands, all these pop kind of girly permed, sort of heavily made up heavy metal bands all appeared. And that's when it dawned on me that there's no such thing as an accidental culture. Culture is engineered going forward. All the pop music in the charts today, all the movies to do with vampires, all that stuff is all pre-engineered by a certain sort of psychopathic overclass which decides the future going forward. I've been studying this for a long time, and this goes back a very long way, mainly right back to H.G. Wells and the Fabian Society in England back in the 1920s, where they decided to invent the genre of science fiction in order to get people used to a future they wanted to give them. That's why H.G. Wells wrote stories such as The Time Tunnel and Things to Come. It was to engineer people's thoughts in order to accept them. This is the purpose of science fiction. The purpose of science fiction is not entertainment. The purpose of science fiction is to get you ready for the future. You watch a film like Avatar, people think it's all about, this beautiful relationship between the Na'vi and their environment. No, the purpose of Avatar is to get you used to the fact that NATO troops are always going to be coming. That was the real underlying message of that story. And so my time in the music business and then later on working in Wall Street, particularly in marketing and communications, I became aware that we're being engineered going forward.
Okay, Thomas, we will pick up this and something about Lady Gaga. How did she didn't just evolve. This wasn't all her.
No. She was engineered. All the pop stars are engineered. All the big ones are all hand-picked to sell certain agendas. The purpose of Lady Gaga is to sell the transhumanist agenda, which is basically, also Star Trek played at the Borg. That was a big part of that as well. The idea of that going forward, the psychopaths in charge, there's too many of us. We're not good for their business model going forward. And they basically want us hating ourselves, and then they want to replace us with a lot less of us. And then we're also to have us mechanized, because the ultimate slave is one who won't say no. And they're very concerned about the fact that we can think for ourselves, that we go on strike. And so they want to get into our consciousness, and they've been after this for a long time. This is what psychiatry was all about, really, to get into our minds so they could alter us. This is why Sigmund Freud's nephew was Edward Bernays, and so one led to the other. So we have to, so we're being engineered constantly. Lady Gaga, she is the future, the asexual trans, she is the actual, if a psychopath was to sit down and invent their perfect sexual partner, it would probably be Lady Gaga. She's asexual, not quite a girl, not quite a man. She's kind of catatonic. She doesn't think for herself. She's not very bright. She just mindlessly spouts platitudes. She has all these bizarre routines that don't really make any sense, and you just say, oh, it's art. It's art. So that's what it really means. So we don't know what art is anymore, and it's just to devalue us and to devalue our own humanity as part of this ongoing transhumanist agenda to basically make human beings hate themselves. So she's a classic example of the psychopaths in charge sitting down and saying, let's invent this creature that we'll actually have other human beings aspire to. Marilyn Manson was one of them as well.
Oh, really? Very interesting. By the way, we will take calls at 800-313-9443. So he was also, or she, Marilyn Manson. I have never really, I like classical music. And so I was never really into the music thing with, I liked, certain groups, but I'm really kind of a geeky person, and I never really got involved in the music thing.
But even classical music has been used this way. This is what Wagner's operas are about. Wagner's operas were very much about socially engineering the Germanic notion of the Germanic culture. Playing on the sort of archetypes of the subtext of dark and light. That's what the Ring Cycle about. The Ring Cycle is basically a gigantic psychoanalytical insight into the German psyche, gone from the past and then bringing them into the future. Mozart's The Magic Flute is a Freemasonic opera that's actually built around the idea of transforming the Viennese and European society away from a sort of imperialistic model towards a republican parliamentary model going forward. So we must not get ourselves into this belief that only pop music has been used to change culture. It's been done in art, music, folk traditions going back centuries. This is a very, very old science going probably right back to Babylon. So we're dealing with an ongoing sort of like control of our consciousness through things that we would call art and culture.
Oh, my. All righty. Let's take a phone call. Let's take Arthur in Georgia. Arthur, welcome to the program.
Oh, good afternoon. What an interesting conversation. Wow. You were talking earlier about the movie Avatar, and you were talking about how, these different things are pre-engineered, which I totally agree with. And, when you were talking about all of this, I got to thinking about, going back to when we were talking years ago, how, not Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon and laser beams used to be a thing of fiction, and they became reality. And you mentioned the Borg and transhumanism, and I immediately thought of movies like Universal Soldier, Cyborg, and things like this. And, when we hear talk about the global grid and compact cities, I always talk about an old TV show called Total Recall 2070, which you can watch on Hulu. It's quite frightening, actually. But when you were talking about Avatar, you said it was to prepare us for something was coming, and you said it almost sounded like you said some kind of soldier. What was it you said?
The purpose of the movie Avatar was not to show that human beings have to develop a more empathic relationship to nature, as it had been marketed. The purpose, the psychopathic control grid is the master of the subtext. You really have to look at the subliminal message below that. That's why I was mentioning the Wagner operas below. Wagner was the master of the subtext. But in the movie Avatar, what you're really told is that if you have something and corporations want it, NATO is going to come and take it from your country. No matter if your country is another planet on the other side of the galaxy, NATO is always coming. And that's the real message of the movie Avatar, that you will never, ever be allowed to have sovereign control of your resources, no matter what they are. If corporations, if the global corporate structure wants them, they're going to send in NATO troops. And that was the real message of the movie Avatar.
Okay, you said NATO. I was like, did he say NACO or? Because that was the word I missed. NATO. Wow, that's pretty frightening. Something else. We've heard talk about cybernetic engineering. Do you believe that we're, part of the transhumanism is to move us to a culture to prepare the people to be combined with machinery, like in the Borg? And I'll listen.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you got.
Oh yeah. We're already there. What do you think? Breast implants and things like collagen, and this is the beginning of it. Now they're on top of introducing cell phone. The next generation of cell phones and mobile communication will be implanted into our brains directly. This is a very, very big thing that's going on behind the scenes, and quite openly. There's lots of, if you look at YouTube, the robots are becoming more and more realistic. Things like sex dolls and sex toys are part of the transhumanism thing as well. They're now promoting, there's something called the real doll, which is actually a man can get this doll that looks so realistic, he doesn't need a real woman anymore. And she even comes with a program. There's even another one that's called Frigid Farrah, and she comes with a program that you can rape her if she refuses you sex. So this is what we're dealing with here. We are already well into the transhumanist thing. It's coming at us constantly. It's just coming at us the way psychopaths always do things, piecemeal, bit by bit, under the radar, until one day we wake up and we're not human beings anymore.
Well, I guess that left Arthur speechless. Arthur.
Well, man, I'll tell you, the more you get into this, the more just Orwellian it becomes. It's at the point to where I look in the mirror and I'm beginning to wonder, am I seeing a real person anymore? And, with what you're talking about, it got me to thinking about this new set of eyeglass kind of thing Google just came out with. I don't even think I want one of them because I don't know what they might be pumping into my eyes.
Exactly. You must maintain your humanity at all costs. Do not let them put any kind of chip inside you. As soon as that's in there, you're done. You're finished. You've had it. The ultimate objective is to get into your consciousness. Once they get into your consciousness, you will lack the ability to change. Aldous Huxley gave a speech at Berkeley back in the 1950s where he said that the ultimate objective of the industrial society and the democratic society is to use chemicals and technology and entertainment to make people love their servitude. And he actually said, this is the actual language this guy used. He said there's no need for concentration camps and firing squads if we have them drugged up on chemicals, and everyone's on psychmeds these days, and glued to the television. And you tell me that hasn't happened. Speaking of Orwellian, Aldous Huxley was one of the lecturers of George Orwell when George Orwell was in school. And Orwell wrote 1984, Huxley wrote Brave New World, and George Orwell was also his Spanish tutor during the Spanish Civil War, was the guy who assassinated Trotsky in Mexico. So we live in a world where a small bunch of interconnected people control the destiny of humanity, and all the dots are very easily and frighteningly connected. And what they basically want to do is switch off our humanity.
Wow. I thank you so much, sir, and Miss Spangola, absolutely fantastic show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. All righty, let's quickly take Chuck in Texas. Chuck, welcome to the program.
How are y'all today?
Good. And you?
I have a question. I'm doing okay. I understand from what the gentleman is saying, I'm sorry I missed his name, that psychopathy, if that's the correct term, is not contagious per se. It's you're born with it. But can people be trained to react in a psychopathic manner as a people? In other words, all right, suspending your conscience for our SWAT teams, our police SWAT teams, for a parent to know, having been given the information that the toxicity of injections to give them.
Gentlemen, hang on. We do have to take a 3-minute break, and we'll be back, and we'll pick it up on the other side of the break. Be right back. Very interesting comment, question.
Yeah,
I didn't quite get Chuck's question. What was that again?
Okay, the question is, can a people be trained to react in a psychopathic manner, i.e. or is it just suspended reality? Our SWAT teams that attack so viciously, parents who will inject their children with poisons even after being informed of the dangers of inoculations for the convenience of public school or whatever, or is that just... Am I going down there? I'm hard time trying.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the proto-psychopathic mindset. Absolutely, an entire society can be made that way. Not just individual things like, certain police departments who are fired up and, whipped up into a frenzy and paranoia and see the people are supposed to protect as enemies. It's happened all through history. The Chinese Cultural Revolution was a very interesting example of this. You had these Chinese red youthleagues who used to basically just round up anyone, bring them out into a field. They would shoot half of them dead and leave the other half alive. The other half one half would be killed, and the other half would be left with what they would call a bullet of fear in their brains. So when they would return back to their own communities, they would do anything the government told them to do in order to stay alive. And this is how the Chinese Cultural Revolution was engineered, through fear that was imposed on people, and that turned people into psychopaths. The same thing happened in Cambodia under Pol Pot, who I would like to inform people was educated as a Western intellectual in Paris by many of the same people we have actually spoken about earlier. Pol Pot was a Western pseudo-intellectual who moved back to his native land and killed half the people in this bizarre Marxist experiment to control them by moving them out of the cities into the countryside. That also worked in the same dynamic. Jonestown was the same way as well. Those people who took part in murdering all those other people there for Jim Jones were also made proto-psychopathic through a combination of drugs and fear. Yes, it can happen. It's very frightening to think that, but groups can be whipped up into frenzies. Germany during the Second World War, it goes on and on and on.
So it's not too off base to say that the United States population is slightly psychopathic?
Well, I wouldn't say I go to the United States quite a bit, and I live there, and I'm always struck by how wonderful just about everybody in the United States is. However, their culture is under control of a very sinister bunch right now, and has been since probably George Bush Sr. Back in the 80s, and it has whipped up. It has created a lot of fear in people through things like the mainstream media, terrors and paranoias. There's also things like psychotropic meds and Ritalin are prescribed at an astonishing rate. I think now the United States now consumes 80% of the world's antidepressants. This is a very frightening statistic. The American people are not proto-psychopathic. The American people are under attack. And unfortunately for them, they are the first ones who are getting it. They're not unique. It'll eventually come to Europe. It's already coming to Ireland. Our financial system and economy has been destroyed by the same people. And each country is now getting its own attack. You guys, unfortunately, are being used with this whole psych med attack and through media and things like that. That's why I'm always amazed when I go to America and see the endless numbers of ads on TV during the day for medications from Zoloft and stuff like that. This is what I'm saying, what I said before about the other gentleman about the transhumanist thing. Protect your consciousness and protect your humanity at all cost, because the psychopaths want to get in there. They haven't won yet. Their backs are against the wall. We're waking up to them. There's a massive global awakening going on. More and more people are now aware, thanks to the internet, that the world is not like they've been told it is, that they basically live in a mirage or an illusion that's been created by a psychopathic structure. So we're at a very hopeful time. So please don't get depressed or frightened about this. We've never had the knowledge and the ability to take these people down like we have before. We're going to take them down by becoming aware of them and not complying with them. If they try to get you whipped up into a war for oil, do not support it. If they try to get you whipped up into racial things or anything like that, or fears, and it's happening. Look at the wholesale rejection all over the world of the 2009 swine flu hype, the so-called pandemic that never happened. Almost nobody took the vaccines because they knew it was just a big public bailout for big pharma. See, that's all that was. So be hopeful of the future. We're actually, even though it looks like it's bleak on the horizon, always remember that human beings have a capacity to survive incredible things. And ultimately, all of us, even the smallest person, is far more dynamic and creative than any of the big psychopaths. So, yes, it can happen, but it doesn't mean it's the end game.
Well, I appreciate this show. It's been really enlightening.
All righty, thanks, Chuck. All righty, we're going to a 3-minute break. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors. Does your guest have any thoughts as to what purpose psychopaths would have in the evolutionary process?
Yes. The purpose they would have in the evolutionary process would be their behavior and their treatment of people, individuals, and societies allows the rest of us to implement more compassionate laws to protect the rights of others. I'll give an example of that. Catholic priests molesting young children has brought in great awareness of the problem of pedophilia and how to deal with these people that never existed before. So that's an example of how psychopaths have been good for evolution. They've caused the rest of us, by their behavior, to look after the most vulnerable in society. This is why we don't have workhouses anymore. This is why we don't have children working down the mines anymore when they're 9 years old. The abuses by the psychopaths of the past, the reaction to them has allowed us to evolve as a society. In terms of a biological evolution, I think it's pretty much the same idea. The psychopaths, because they're not creative, and they're not creative, they're devious and they're manipulative, but they're not creative. Because they're like this, they are basically an evolutionary dead end. There's a lot of these psychopathic types that I talk to, and I have to deal with them through my work and through research. They all have this belief that they're the next stage in evolution. They're not. They're just an evolutionary spasm that's jumped off to the side. And this happens through all species, all through the whole biological range. A subspecies branches off, and it doesn't necessarily survive. In fact, most fail, and that's all a psychopath is. They're a temporary evolutionary homopsychopathic, homopsychopathicus, you could even call them, subspecies that is just here for a limited while and then they're gone.
All righty. This is from Joe, and he says, I agree with the media-created culture. In 1940, the movie Sergeant York prepped America for World War II. In 1966, the Green Berets prepped for Vietnam. In the 1990s, Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers prepped people for the War on Terror. What are the vampire and zombie apocalypse movies preparing us for? Since zombies are ordinary people and they have to be shot, are we being hardened toward killing our friends and neighbors?
We could be. I think the zombie and the particularly the vampire TV shows, the purpose of that is to make psychopathology seem normal, because most of the people who run the mainstream media are psychopaths. They're trying to dehumanize the human while humanizing the monster, and that's what's happening here. Also, the zombie thing is very interesting. That's to do with the psychotropic meds, that everything from Zoloft to Ritalin, and people walking around in dazes and they think they're not. I know people who have gone on. Now, I'm not talking about people who are genuinely have mental illness or genuinely have a condition and need this medication. GPs, clinics, psychiatrists are handing out these drugs now, like M&Ms, and large numbers of people are now on these psychotropic drugs to get through an emotional crisis in their life, where in the past they would have been able to go through a more spiritual or through a more cultural way of dealing with it, maybe through creativity. They're not. They're taking drugs, these very, very dangerous drugs instead. Now, I have known people in my life who have gone on these drugs, and the person who was on them is no longer in there anymore. There's somebody very different now inside them since they took these drugs. Their dynamic spark of life has been taken from them. And this is a big problem. And that's what the culture always also, in a Jungian sense, reflects what's happening to us as well. Just like the UFO things in the 1950s and all these UFO sci-fi films, they were sort of a psychological archetype of fear of being invaded by the communists. Today, the zombies are a psychological archetype of fear of an entire society walking around in a daze on psychotropic drugs. That's what the zombies represent. The vampires shows like True Blood represent the normalization of the psychopathic behavior in people. So we don't think it's abnormal that the people who are cruel, vicious, hypersexual, and look like they're on their last leg, we don't think that's abnormal anymore. We think that's normal.
Oh, my. All right. Here's a comment from Nancy. Now we can understand why fraternity boys are encouraged to perform cruel acts upon animals and other victims during their initiations. Also, wouldn't the monarch slave program fall under the same methodology of mind control?
Yeah, the whole MK Ultra program was set up by a psychopathic Canadian psychiatrist because they couldn't do it on American soil, because at the time, American citizens would, thanks to the Bill of Rights, were not able, which George Bush Jr. signed away, would not have been able to have been experimented on in this way. So they brought them up to a place like Toronto, and they created all these mind-controlled slaves, and they did appalling things to people. A mother might go in there suffering from depression. Next thing, she found herself in a room where you would have psychiatrists playing messages at loud volume all day long, going, "Kill your mother, kill your mother, kill your mother, kill your mother." This is exactly what happened. And people who say that this MK Ultra thing and this monarch thing and this Manchurian Candidate stuff is a conspiracy theory, well, they're idiots, because there's a vast amount of congressional papers and documents that was uncovered in the United States to show that this is what was going on for years. This is how obsessed they are with getting into our consciousness.
And of course, this brainwashing thing, it doesn't even have to be formalized, because as you mentioned, there's TV, which is basically programming us to behave a certain way, to buy certain products, to do certain things. Also, what kind of role do you think that J.K. Rowling has in the things that she does?
Oh, that's very interesting. I've never asked this one before. The Harry Potter and all that. To trivialize spirituality would be my answer to that. To make people believe that the ability to have a magical experience cannot be rooted in their own spirituality or their own life existence, and make them believe that the only way a magical experience can happen is in Hogwarts by waving a wand that you've gone to this school. I think that's the purpose of that. I think that's part of the whole agenda, to rob us of our spirit, to rob us of our spiritual identity. Hogwarts, I often found it interesting that J.K. Rowling rose up at the same time as Richard Dawkins. You have one side, you have one group telling you that you don't have a soul, you're a biological meat robot that has no greater destiny than to become fertilizer or to pass on your DNA. And at the same time this was going on, you have the Harry Potter idea that a magical or a transcendental or a mystical experience is only something that happens in a sort of a Disney kind of world view of magic and magicians, and you are divorced from this, and it's all very silly at the end of the day. And that was the purpose, I think, of that. I think that a lot of that stuff is about the destruction of the human soul.
Okay. Let's take another phone call. Let's take Lark in Texas. Lark, welcome to the program.
Well, hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Great. I have a thought for your guest, and I would appreciate his comment. I contend that people who are recruited into fraternities and sororities at our colleges and universities, it is these institutions which are probably some of the most fertile ground for recruiting future psychopaths because they have demonstrated a willingness to attach themselves to the celebrity culture, the culture of sports heroes and movie stars and beauty queens and machismo and some of these other things that we're acculturated to, and demonstrating that they're willing to essentially jump through hoops to be able to attain to a status that is rather superior to others beneath them, so to speak. They, in effect, become recruitment tools for the people who deign to rule us. Your comment?
Yeah, Lark, I absolutely agree with that. That's the purpose of them. That's the purpose of all these things, from Freemasonry to things like there's an organization in this part of the world called Common Purpose, which is a registered charity, and they're designed with looking for future leaders. And they're a vast organization that has infiltrated public and professional bodies, particularly media and journalism, all over Britain and Ireland. And their purpose is to source out what they call future leaders. And if you look at their workshop models and training modules, what they're really looking for are psychopaths. So yeah, this has been going on for years. You're exactly what you say is 100% true.
Well, that's wonderful you bring Common Purpose up, because people like the Angry Cheese in England and people like Brian Gerrish, of course, have exposed them or are working hard to expose them.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking with Brian Gerrish in London on the 3rd of February, I think. So he's done phenomenal work exposing that, and also how Common Purpose fills our cities with appalling and soul-destroying art in order to keep us in a constant state of depression.
Well, that's why we have so many psychopaths, communists, and fascists in our society. What is today known as a communitarian. I believe Brian Gerrish would attest to that.
Yeah, the whole European Union, which is very much against, is a communitarian idea. That the idea that the community, but it's not really the community, it's the state, is the ultimate objective of your life, and that definitely comes out of the Marxist ideal. We're basically all living in a Marxist. Now I'm talking about a true Marxist state. Karl Marx was one of the engineers of the 19th century belief that human beings were just units, machines, and that although playing on very emotive terms of talking about how the workers should own the capital because they put in the labor, that was really what he was doing, was using a very clever ruse to create a mechanical, scientifically run society. So all this really comes about from this idea that human beings are just machines and society should be run like a beehive, which is all very psychopathic.
Yeah, it goes back to Bernard de Mandeville, the fable of the bees.
Yeah. It goes back to Plato, really. If you really want to go back to where it really became written in, Plato's Republic would be ground zero.
He was a Kabbalist and a collectivist, and probably a psychopath himself.
Plato, well, he talked about starving the population of the Grecian islands in order to reduce the population, and starting wars to reduce the population of young men. So yeah, that's a psychopath.
And of course the expostulation of the noble lie is if this is a necessary thing and that people should be herded into groups and assigned labels like gold, silver, and bronze.
Yeah, well, you look at what America achieved. And what America achieved in a short time was due to individualism. And that's not the same thing as selfishness. America, from the United States, and even countries like Australia had a similar idea. It was a brand new start for immigrants from around the world. They were fraught with terrible things as well, like the destruction of the indigenous cultures. But however, the idea of an individual being left alone is a very powerful thing. And that's something that would be, when the history of the human race is said and done, that will be the United States' great contribution to humanity, was the idea of the individual being allowed to do their own thing. And sadly that's more and more being taken away, because that's not good for the psychopathic system.
Well, I do appreciate your responses Deanna, wonderful guest today, and please carry on.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
Lark. Okay, you were talking about recruitment in certain fraternities. Now, I know that the CIA does a lot of recruiting in colleges. Are they also looking for psychopath people who would be willing to go out and create chaos in other countries in order to allow corporations to go in and plunder the resources?
Oh, of course. Well, you look at a couple of years ago, an investigation into the CIA, into the Pentagon, found that incredible amounts of money, taxpayers' money, was being spent on downloading child porn within the Pentagon. And this was because, well, many psychopaths are pedophiles as well. Well, they're interested in young girls and young boys. And so that's a damning indictment of the kind of people that are actually working inside there. Now, I'm not going to say all of them, but they were actually paying for child porn and downloading it on the Pentagon on their personal computers in the Pentagon using their credit card, which was when the investigation was uncovered. You can Google this online. It was immediately shut down. So this is the kind of people they are. You look at James Bond. People have this idea that James Bond is this cool, glamorous, great, amazing person. James Bond's a pure psychopath. Any woman that comes into contact with him is dead. She's disposed of. She's just used and then discarded. He has no regrets for how many people he kills. He's obsessed with his status and his style of living and his luxury. And that's not your typical secret agent. Your typical secret agent is probably some pathetic antisocial failure, some loser, low-level psychopath who the system knows would be good for spying on people. He was probably the kind of guy that when he was a kid used to keep notes on his neighbours' coming and goings, probably a social outcast, a low-level, slow-functioning psychopath. And these are always what they recruit for Secret Service agencies. The NKPD in the Soviet Union under Trotsky, being a psychopath himself, deliberately recruited the local psychopaths to operate murder squads. They basically arrested anyone they found and they would shoot them. Trotsky knew that the local psychopaths were the best ones to get this done, so he gave them a little badge and a title, played on their narcissism, stuck them in the NKPD, and told them basically to arrest anyone and shoot them. Because he knew that these people would then, after they would say, pick up a married couple on the street, drag them into a basement and shoot them, they would go to their house afterwards and loot it. No conscience, no compassion, just business. So this is why the psychopathic control grid very much values psychopaths. They want their person in business.
Right. Okay, we could apply that same model to Rhodes Scholars. I mean, any kind of scholarship program or any kind of elite type of program that is set up by the top psychopaths are probably designed to find the people who will carry forth the agenda of the psychopathic model, correct?
Yeah, well, just look at Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes named half of Africa after himself. Rhodesia.
Yes.
Rhodesia once stretched all the way from northern Tanzania way down into South Africa. So
wow.
There's narcissistic psychopathic pathology for yourself.
All righty, we do have to take a 3-minute break. We'll be right back with our last segment. Now you're talking about Africa, and which brought up the idea of Bill Gates and the vaccine programs over there. And then Bob, one of our listeners, said, Uganda is suffering a disease in which the youngsters are sleeping uncontrollably and will die. There's no known cure. This is probably all caused by vaccines. Your thoughts about that?
I just find it amazing how with all their money, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are obsessed with getting as many pharmaceuticals into Africa as possible when these people need food, housing, clothing, and shelter. This is what they really need. You cannot feed a starving child with a flu vaccine. You can make all kinds of arguments that these birth control programs are helping to reduce population. But a part of me wonders, why is Bill Gates so obsessed with Africa? Is it driven out of some kind of repressed neuroses, some kind of aristocratic fear of growing up in a gated all-white community that he sees people of color as a threat? I find this very disturbing. I find it a very disturbing mindset that is the whole objective of these programs is the removal of the African, not the helping of them. A person who's living now needs food. They don't need to be sterilized. And this is what's going on. Now, whether these people that are having these problems in Africa are falling asleep because of a vaccine problem, I honestly can't say. It could be anything from polluted water supplies to some kind of other virus. But that brings up another thing. Give them decent water, give them decent abilities to actually, prepare food in a clean way with fresh drinking water. And a lot of those problems will be solved. But no, it has to be a big cash injection into the pharmaceutical companies. It's also part of the idea that science is infallible. You see, there's no difference between Bill Gates going down to Africa with vaccines and Catholic priest missionaries going down there with prayer books. It's the same thing. They're both useless.
Interesting. Well, you have certainly been a remarkable guest, Thomas, and I do hope that you will come back and join us. And I hope that I see you have some programs coming up where you're going to be appearing. You said in London. You're going to be meeting with some very interesting people, John Perkins, William Engdahl. You're going to be speaking with them in Dublin and in Manchester and in London. And I hope that you're very effective there. I know that you will be. You've been just a remarkable guest, and I really hope you come back, and I'm going to thoroughly enjoy your book. I think that your book will allow people to know exactly what we are faced with. So thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you, Deanna, and thanks to your callers for excellent questions. It was
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.